So welcome to Beauty of Colors podcast. Niamh, it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much, Cleanne. Thanks for being with you. I love everything you're doing with this podcast and empowering people to, recognize who they are and what their stories are to tell. So it's a wonderful opportunity that you're offering to the world. So thank you for inviting me to be part of it.
You're very welcome. So tell the listeners about you and your journey on traveling the world. Ooh, I'm excited.
Well, believe it or not, I'm very lucky. I was born in Ireland, which, as people know, is a very small country. We like to say that we were almost born with a passport in our hand, ready to go and explore the entire world. And growing up, obviously at school, I didn't know that there was anything bigger than Ireland at the time. But when I was 12, my parents were both actors. And my dad, Ray McAnally, had been cast in a movie that was supposed to run for about 5 weeks. And unfortunately, at the beginning of day one, the other main character didn't feel that the two of them would gel for the show. So my dad was said, okay, you don't have to be with it for the rest of the thing, but we're going to pay out your contract. And what my dad did was he said, you know what? I'm going to take this money and I'm going to take our family on our first overseas holidays. And
Wow.
so we went to Spain in the middle of an Irish winter.
Mhm.
And I thought, good Lord, apparently the sun shines in other countries in the winter. So from that day forward, I said, I know what I'm going to do. As soon as I'm old enough to grow up and go, leave home, I want an atlas for my birthday, and I'm going to travel the world and sort of try and meet all these other cultures and creeds and religions and everything people are trying to do, all walks of life. And I'm going to go live A, in places that are warm, and B, try and see as many people as I can. And what furthered that for me was during our English class in school, we had to look at a writing from Cardinal John Newman. And one of his things was that it's a school of knowledge for universities, a school of knowledge of every kind, consisting of teachers and learners from every quarter. And at the time, growing up in Ireland in the 70s, it was very much a homogenous society. I mean, it's changed radically now since we joined the EU and we have freedom of borders and people are coming. But at the time, it wasn't. So my first venture was to go to France, to live in Paris and study French language and literature at the International Society of the Sorbonne University. And I met people from all through Europe, from the Middle East and everywhere. And it was such an eye-opening experience. And I said, this is it. This is what I want to do. But I came back to Ireland and I started working as a television director, first an actress and then a TV director, following kind of in the family footsteps, if you like, because all of my family were in the entertainment business. And one of the things it taught me was A, to have more than one string to your bow, and two, to believe that anything is possible depending on your mindset. So I envisaged all these dreams for me, for my life, and I bought into the belief that they would happen. Once I kind of set out that image, I said, okay, it's set out that this is a goal I would love to have, and it will come to me in due course when the time is right. It was almost like I had discovered or stumbled on the secret before it became one. Do you know what I mean? That idea. But I
Mhm.
also knew you had to take action. It doesn't just all fall in your lap. So when I was working with the television, I started to do some volunteer projects around the world. And the first one was in Belize. I'm very much into the marine environment. I'm actually known now as the writer on the water. It's kind of my brand. But I started working on this project in Belize, which was a marine conservation program, to help Belize set up a marine sanctuary for their reef, which is actually the second longest reef in the world after the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. And they were trying to protect the environment and they were staging different items. So I was working with divers. I was a diving officer at the time and working with these projects. At the end of the 4 months I was there, there was one girl who was going back to a job in England. And she said, well, that's it. Now I'm back to my dreary job. I'm going to be looking at a window at a wall, and that's what my life is going to be. And I remember saying to her at the time, it will be if that's what you believe. But it doesn't have to be. You can create whatever your life wants to be. So spool forward a couple of years for me. and I ended up on the island of Sark in the Channel Islands between UK and France. And
Mhm.
this was because I had done a project with people down in Fiji, and for a reason, I had to come back to Los Angeles. And I was driving on a freeway in LA, and I suddenly realized these people here are so different in attitude from the people I'd met in Fiji and Vanuatu on various different projects, where the people seemed to be intrinsically happy, even though they weren't financially as well off, let's say, as people in America or California. And I thought, what is it that's driving that? Why are people like cars are passing me by 80, $90,000 cars, and the people behind the wheels were like grumpy. And I'm thinking, you have no idea what is this about? And I was starting to think maybe I'm getting grumpy in this environment. So I went home and I did the only logical thing a person will do. I Googled islands without cars. And that's how I came up with three, right? I found Herm and Sark in the UK Channel Islands and another one called Hydra in Greece. And at that time, Greece was going through a major unemployment problem. And I thought, I don't want to go to Greece, even though it's a beautiful and warm country, but I don't want to take a job from a local who could well deserve the job or need a job, right?
Mhm.
So I decided to go to this island of Sark. I was going to stay 6 months.
Mhm.
And I fell in love with this beautiful island, 3.5 miles long, mile and a half wide, no airport, only accessible by ferry. And there were some beautiful luxury hotels on the island. And I was managing one of them. And at the end of the fourth year, the hotel decided they were going to go from year round to seasonal, and they were going to say, okay, well, we have to lay everybody off. How are we going to find jobs for these people? And I found this volunteer website that encouraged people to volunteer 5 hours a day, 5 days a week in exchange for food and lodging. And I thought, how wonderful, a chance for me to give back, but also it would mean that they could come back to me at the end of the winter and we would start again and they were already trained and have their job. And at that time, I had previously been divorced. I was married to somebody in America and I got divorced. And I'd gone through this body clock problem of it's too late now to have children. I'm not going to have children. And it was one of my dreams, obviously, growing up. Oh, I'd love to have children and a family. And instead of dwelling there, and I'm not saying I didn't dwell there for a little bit, but instead of dwelling there, I said, I've got to rethink this. I got to think outside the box. And I came up with this idea, well, you know, what is it that people who are now raising children and have the obligation and the responsibility to raise their children, what is it that they cannot do that I could do?
Mhm.
So I thought, I know. People raising families with schools and jobs and mortgages, they don't have the opportunity to take off and volunteer travel for long periods of time. And I thought, okay, well, maybe that's my calling right now. So it's what I did. And I took off for a year, traveled around the world, all through the South Pacific, working with various different hospitality families and helped them. I learned from their culture, Fiji, Vanuatu, Palau, Kingdom of Tonga, up through Australasia, and then back around to the UK area. And that was it. I had done a year and I thought, great, I am now going to get back to work and settle down, right? Plan A.
Mhm.
But as I was sending out these resumes, I became addicted to this website. It was like virtual travel the whole time. So I thought I Googled one more time and I said, I'll do one last project, which was to volunteer to crew a boat, a sailboat from Florida to the Bahamas. And it was only going to take 1 month. And I thought, this is it. I'm going to go do this and then I'll seriously go back to work. And I got on board. And first of all, my family immediately said to me, wait a minute, you're going to go to sea with somebody you've never met and you don't have that much experience as a sailor. How do you know he's not an axe murderer? Right. And so, and so it turned out in hindsight, his friends were saying to him, You're going to take a woman on board your boat. You don't know anything about them. How do you know she is not a modern day pirate and 6 miles out to sea, she's going to dump you overboard and take your boat, right?
I guess you
So,
both are thinking the same.
the same thing, right?
Mhm.
But one of the things that I have come to believe is we all have a gut instinct in us. And, people talk about the hairs going up on the back of your neck and that when something feels off, and you can ignore it and push through, or you can listen to it. And I think now I've actually started to learn to listen to my gut. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to meet this person. He's going to be on land at the time I meet him. If I get any feeling that this is off, I will walk away. And I met him and I thought, no, this is fine. This is genuinely who I think it is. And so got on the boat for a month, sailed over to the Bahamas, absolutely idyllic. And I was due to go to Ireland for a family reunion in 6 months' time. And I thought, you know what? I probably won't settle down to a job in between now and then. So I helped continue to sail with him down through the Bahamas. And at one point, some friends reached out to me and they said, you need to get back on land. You need to get a job. You need to do this. You need to do that. And I said, let me think about that for a second. I could go back to land. I could get a good job. I could earn a lot of money, save it all up so that someday in the future, I could have enough money to get on a boat and sail off into the Bahamas. And I thought, wait a minute. I'm already here doing exactly that. And it also taught me how to live in the now.
Mhm.
We only have today. You and I only have these moments while we're talking. And for me, I've realized that fear comes from putting yourself too far forward into the future and wondering about the what ifs that may or may not happen. And so I leaned into that. And at the same time, I've always written. And I handed the captain was called Gary Krieger, and I handed him one of my short stories while we were on the boat, and he said, "Oh, you have got to finish writing. You've got to keep going. This is your real calling in life, right?" And so I used to work on the boat in the mornings, and then I would write in the afternoons. And while we were living on the boat in a 40-foot space, 24/7, nowhere else to go, no television, no internet, very rarely cell phone service. Guess what happened? We had to talk to each other and we started to learn who the other person was absolutely from the inside out. And we just met at a more profound level and a soul level. And it was not he said this, she said that, what'd you do with your day? It was really profound communication. And so as a result of that, we continued on the boat. And 4 years later, he proposed to me on the deck down in Beckway.
Oh, that is so.
And then we tried to get married in 2020. And
Mhm.
guess what happened? The
Go.
pandemic hit, right?
Mhm.
So in the end, we were in Antigua at the time
Mhm.
when we saw these two guys come ashore having rowed 3,000 miles across the Atlantic.
Wow.
And this was part of a Talisker Whiskey Atlantic Challenge, which is now called the world's toughest row. And Gary and I had been at sea in some very bumpy conditions in the Atlantic. We had done like a 10-day passage from the Bahamas down to Puerto Rico and all through Grenada down south.
Mhm.
And I thought that was a 40-foot boat. These guys are in a 20-foot wooden boat and they have spent 70 days at sea rowing physically, no sails, no engine, no nothing. And I thought, I've got to meet these people.
Mhm.
So we jumped in our dinghy, we went out to the finishing line, and they when they cross this finishing line, they have this kind of ritual, which is their like golden,
Mhm.
like the golden moment of standing up at the Olympic podium, right? And they light these handheld flares that they've had on the boat for emergencies, and they stand up. And I just started taking picture after picture after picture. And I turned around to Gary and I said to him, "Oh my goodness, we've got the shot." And I didn't know what it was going to be for. I just knew this was an important photograph.
Mhm.
And when they finally came ashore and everybody did the ceremony and said, "Here's your finishing time," and you made it, they then the crowd disappeared, and then they were sitting there by themselves with just sitting having their first meal from the hotel. And we went over and I showed him the photograph. And one of the guys looked at it and he said, not only did the photograph sum up their 70 days at sea, it
Mhm.
also encapsulated the 4-year struggle it took them to prepare and to get to the starting line of that race. So we got to talking and we invited them onto our boat the next night for dinner. And we started talking, and I learned more and more about their story. And it was like if you were writing a novel, you couldn't have made up the stuff that happened to them, right? And I said, "I'll tell you what, I'll agree to write your story on one condition.
Mhm.
It can't be about how to row an ocean."
Mhm.
Because in fairness, you get in a boat, you get your oars, and you row like this for a very long time. Okay, so that's like one chapter.
Yeah.
I said, "But really, I'm all about people and why they do what they do. So if you will dig deep emotionally and spiritually and psychologically as to why you did it, how it affected your families, and in a couple of months' time, when you've had time to reflect, how has the experience changed you as a human being? How has it opened up your world? What has changed?" And they agreed to that. And over that year during 2020, I did a gazillion Zoom calls, phone calls, emails, etc. And I wrote their story in which is now called Flares Up, a story bigger than the Atlantic, which was a huge, huge seller. In fact, I have a copy of it here. I'll show you the
Okay,
photograph if you
sure. Yeah.
like.
Mhm.
This
Mhm.
is, let me see what it is.
Yeah.
That's the photograph I had taken of them when
Okay.
they came ashore.
Wow.
And it's that story of adversity, like triumphing over that adversity, overcoming obstacles. And the real purpose of it was for me
Mhm.
was to inspire people, all of us. We're not going to all row an ocean. I, for one, am never going to row an ocean. We might not all climb Mount Everest. We might not all run a marathon. But whatever little goal we set ourselves, whether it's big or small, I'm hoping this story inspires people to push past those obstacles
Mhm.
and to overcome them and achieve the goals they set themselves, and basically to try and live your greatest life, because that's what we're here to do, right?
Yeah.
That's what we're all achieving. And we've all got that story to tell. We've all got that life to uniquely live and
Mhm.
contribute, like what you're doing with the work you do in your whole nutritional area and what you're doing with your podcasts. We all have our short and we can all lift each other up.
Yeah, that's true. You're right. So what are some of the you also do blogging as well. Do you blog about your journey kind of going around the world, or do you blog about your book? What is the blog specifically about?
Specifically at the moment, it is about, first of all, looking at the inspiration that other creeds and cultures can bring to your life, that we don't live in a blinkered kind of society,
Mm.
and that we all are uniquely the same. We're all looking for love. We all want to love. We have love to share. And that we can meet together and as human beings. And we're all essentially deep down, we're all the same is part of my messaging, if you like. At the moment, I'm a guest speaker with Celebrity Cruise Lines. In fact, we're heading off to one now next week from Miami to Los Angeles via the Panama Canal, which I'm very excited about.
Mhm.
And some of the talks I give on that are about these kind of journeys and how we can contribute to each other, and yes, I'm sharing some stories about my life on the water.
Mhm.
We have another book coming out actually in September, which is it's called Following Sunshine.
Mhm.
And it was from that moment as a child when I realized, whoo, the sun shines somewhere else in November.
Mhm.
And that subtitle is called A Voyage Around the Mind around the world and around the heart, which
Mm.
also goes into the love story that developed while I was living on the boat with Gary. And here we are 8 years later, married and in love and doing a lot of these projects ourselves together. And I think the core message is I am, in terms of, I'll give you an example. Out of Flares Up, one of the rowers who rowed in that boat had suffered a brain hemorrhage. And that was when he got this new lease on life. He decided, I'm going to do something to convince all the naysayers who've been in my life that, I can amount to something. And at the end of the 70 days at sea, the one thing he turned around and he said to me, he said, I am enough. I didn't have to prove it. I was always enough because he had been dyslexic as well, he still has dyslexia, but he had overcome that as a child in school and all the bullying and people thinking he was stupid, etc. And the funny part was when we were doing the launch in Dublin in Ireland, and Jeremy Irons, the actor, had written forward, and he came along, and we were all on stage together. And Paul, the firefighter, was on stage, and he said, "Yeah, I always knew now. I know now. I always was enough. So I kind of actually wasted 70 days of my life, right?" And so I turned around to him and I said, "Oh, if you've wasted 70 days of your life, thanks very much, because I've now wasted 2 years of mine writing your
The book.
story." But and it's a thing we have to come to terms with. And I think the more life experience we have, we start to become a little kinder on ourselves.
Mm.
Because I do think we beat ourselves up along the way, and we start to measure ourselves, our insides by somebody else's outsides, what look like success. But nobody really knows what's going on inside the person themselves, and measuring ourselves against somebody is fruitless, it
Mm.
only causes stress, or maybe in a bad way give somebody a superiority complex over somebody else, or vice versa. And I think for me, my main message is that we're unique, we're the same,
Mhm.
we all have a story to tell worth sharing, and every one of us, it doesn't matter how tiny it could be, you never know the moment you're having an impact for the positive on somebody else, right?
Mhm.
There was a time after my divorce where I got to a place of, what's the point? Do you know what I mean? I'm not going to say I was absolutely 100% suicidal, but I was at a low, low place where it was like, well, if this is it, you can take me now, kind of thing. You know what I mean? I have nothing more to give. I can't see my way up out of this. And before the divorce, I had gone to see this counselor, and I knew in my heart I needed to get divorced. And she said to me at one point, she said, if I'm not saying this should be your decision, but if it is your decision, why wait one more day to be happy? And that, for some reason, was just like a key to a lock that I had put myself under, because I grew up in a country where at the time divorce was not legal. There was no divorce in Ireland.
Mm.
And it was, you make your bed, you lie on it. This is forever. If you've made a mistake and you're not compatible with the person you've chosen to marry, that's your own problem, right? And it took me a long, long time to give myself permission to say, no, this is not right for me. I am not becoming a better version of myself within this union,
Mhm.
right? Now, I can tell you for a fact, people ask me, well, how do you know? How do you know when? How do you know you've met the right person? For me, my definition now is being with Gary has made me a better human being.
Mm.
And together, we have become greater than the sum of our two parts. You
Mm.
know, it's and I think that's kind of important to look at. Don't give up on yourself. Take it a day at a time. Initially, we used to look at each other and I'd say, I like you pretty much. Let's see how it goes, which is a line I kind of adopted from Abraham Hicks.
Mhm.
Um, and I said, we would check in with each other every day and say, yeah, I like you today. Let's live together today. Do you know what I mean? And one of the things living on a sailboat for 6 years out in the middle of the ocean, where you've got to rely on each other for your safety.
Mhm.
I remember one particular row we had where we nearly banged into a dock and it was always going a bit haywire in the wind and it was a little tense, let's say. And and afterwards, with my good Irish disposition, I stormed off, as you do in the middle of a row, right? I
Mhm.
stormed off. And I got as far as the bow of the boat. And then I went, well, now what? I'm in the middle of the ocean. I'm on the bow of the boat with this one other human being. There is nowhere to run. There is nowhere to hide. I have got nothing else to do except turn around, go back down to the cockpit and deal with it, you know? And we learned very quickly that we came up with this idea where, all right, we both know we love each other. We both know we're here together. We need to work together, and we can get this to a level where we say, all right, that's a first fix. We might still have some kind of a charge, in our like still underneath it all.
Mhm.
But what we learned then was get it calm to a level you can, work through. And then later, whether it's a few hours later or a day or later, you can then reapproach the conversation completely calm, no emotional charge attached to it,
Mhm.
and say, well, here's what I was saying, and here's what I meant by it. And this is how your remarks landed on me. And they're saying, well, that's actually not what I was saying. That might have been what you heard. And so we found a way now to get to that conclusion place. And and the funny thing is, this
Mhm.
is something I've learned from traveling around the world, that even if you go to a country where they speak English or the similar language to yours, whether it's Spanish, whether you go from Brazil to Spain or to Argentina, just because people speak the same language doesn't mean there isn't a different culture
Mhm.
and you have things to explore together, right?
Mhm.
So, growing up in Ireland, the way we speak, we used to kind of speak around the bush, as they said, you know. I'll give you a perfect example. One time my mother was visiting. I can tell this story because she's since passed on. But one time she was visiting me when I was in Florida and we're driving in the car, and she said, we passed a Walmart. And she said, oh, is that Walmart? I said, yeah, Mom, do you want to stop? No, 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 it's fine. 5 miles down the road, she goes, is that where they have those slippers? You know, the ones I like that have the whatever, pink, whatever. Yeah, I think it is, Mother. Should we turn around and go back and we can go get them? No, 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 no. So I was just asking, right? The day I'm leaving to go to the dropper at the airport, she's packing up and she goes, do you think we'll be passing a Walmart on the way to the airport? Right?
Sounds like
And
my mom.
and so there, I call that Irish speaking. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And even though we have our own Gaelic language, which is
Mhm.
like a totally different language, but like that's our Irish way of speaking. And the row that happened on the boat between me and Gary was because of this docking issue. He wanted to bring the boat in to dock at get fuel.
Mhm.
And I didn't like the setup. And I was looking at the wind. I was looking at there was another boat on the dock. It was going to be
So
tight.
we
Sorry.
just, I don't want to cut you off, but we
Yeah.
have limited time. It just told me.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay, we're running out of time. Okay, no problem.
Mhm.
But the bottom line was I wasn't clear enough. I didn't say we should not go in there. His was I said maybe we don't need fuel. And so my point was communication and getting that right solves so much.
Oh, yeah, that is so true. So, where can listeners get a copy of your book and how can they get in touch with you?
Well, the best way now is to actually go directly to my website, which is
Mhm.
www.thewriteronthewater.com. And if they want to sign up there, it'll give them all the information on getting the books. My books are available on Amazon and all of the local, online resources. But the best way really is to reach out via the website, and the name of it's right there. It's the writeronthewater.com.
Wow. Well, thank you for being on Beauty of Colors podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it. It's been fun chatting with you.